I'm going to welcome in our first guest, David Curtin. David is always welcome around here because he says it as he finds it, which is so darn refreshing. People just don't do that these days, do they? But David does, and I really appreciate him for that. And I've got him on a funny view thing. There we go. I think we both should be there now. Hello, David.
Hello,
how are you doing?
Sonia. Hey, yeah, managed to get through the technology. Good to be with you.
Wonderful to see you, David. Thank you for being with us. I have no idea what I'm doing with the Zoom this morning. Let me just put it back on gallery. That should be fine. I can't see myself, but maybe I don't need to.
I can
anyway.
see you. So you're looking fine.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. David Curtin of the Heritage Party. And I was noting recently, David, and I'd seen a number of comments online about the Heritage Party, and people were saying things like the Reclaim Party and the Reform Party have loads of money piled into them, whereas the Heritage Party doesn't. But the Heritage Party is out there standing for real people. And I think that is a general sentiment that a lot of people feel, David.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm really glad that people are saying that and appreciating what we're doing. And I just appreciate all the support and encouragement I get from people who say these kind of things all over the place. And it's true, we don't have an awful lot of money. I mean, the money that comes to us is just through people joining the party. It's a small annual fee and then small donations. We don't have a large donor like I think Reclaim has got Jeremy Hoskins, a former Tory donor, and he's pledged £10 million to them. So we don't have any ex-Tory donors. And I really do, I'm actually glad that we don't.
Yes, exactly.
What we want to do, and we're clearly not part of the system and not part of the establishment. Reform has got a really bizarre way of funding themselves. I mean, it's all open on the Electoral Commission's website. They seem to be held up by over £1.5 million of loans from this entity called Tyson Investments Limited, which is Richard Tice's investment company. It's all there. You can look it up on the Electoral Commission's website. But, we don't have any of that either. It's very simple.
But you're out there. You're out there, you put your head above the parapet every time. And as I've said to you before, David, I don't have to agree with all your policies to respect the fact that you as a politician are prepared to walk the talk. And that is the reality. James in the comments says David is a breath of fresh air in the smog of British politics. Angry Octopus wants to know, how can we make David Prime Minister? I don't know, grease a few palms?
That's a really good question. It's very simple. Please join me. Please join the Heritage Party and put yourself forward to stand as a candidate, because I'm really, really privileged to be able to do what I can do now. It's a great honor to serve. I love it, but I can't do it on my own. There's 650 seats in Westminster.
Right.
We need 650 candidates. And, there were local elections just recently where there were 8,000 seats for councillors. And people will say, oh, have you got a councillor for me? Have you got a candidate for me? And I can't put people everywhere unless I get 8,000 people coming to help and join me and stand as well. So, people who ask that question, it's a good question, but I would turn it back, maybe rather rudely and say, it's you get involved because you're the answer to it as well. We need to build up a people's army of people who are going to get involved in politics and change it from within. So, if you've been thinking about it up to now, get involved, because now is the time. And if we don't get thousands of people involved, we're not going to make the change.
Right, exactly. And talking about refreshing attitudes, let's have a look at some of the news that you've chosen to look at this morning, which is completely in accord with the Rise viewers, I have to say. So June, Pride Month, but I thought every month was now Pride Month. I mean, maybe I've got something wrong there, but Pride, of course, historically was about LGB people. These days, very much, according to some people, including myself, it's been taken over by the TQ+. What are your thoughts about Pride Month, David?
I mean, it's all a bit of a mix to me. I mean, but it's too much, and it's like, it's almost half the year is something to do with LGBT, whether it's Pride Month or LGBT History Month or Diversity Week. You can't get away from it, and it just goes crazy in June. People change their logos to have the rainbow in it, and now you've got this weird, what is it, progress flag they call it, with all the the transgender bits in the corner, and that keeps getting added to. But I think people are absolutely sick of it, and they don't want this rammed down their throats, which is happening on an increasing basis. And the processions there for Pride. I mean, you see absolutely degenerate things on the street, and
we have to talk about this, don't we? I mean, such exhibitionism. I tweeted last week about how, look, it's not for me to get involved in whatever your personal fetish is, as long as it doesn't harm anybody else. But the moment that you bring it onto our street, you force me to partake in your fetish. That has to be illegal, surely.
Well, in any other time, in any other setting, people would be arrested immediately for, public disorder, for absolutely, absolute indecency, and they'd be brought before the courts, wouldn't they? Why is it suddenly in Pride Month, nothing is done? These people are just doing things that are overtly sexual, breaking the law, but the police don't do anything. In fact, they even seem to be joining in.
They're captured, aren't they?
The police forces dress up in rainbows, and they waste taxpayers' money kitting out their cars in rainbows, and they start prancing around with all the degeneracy that's going on. So they are completely complicit, allowing people to break the law like this.
Yeah, they are a captured organization. Obviously, they're captured by Stonewall. They're part of the Stonewall Champions League, or whatever it's called these days. But these organizations, they fight to be in that top 100 of the Stonewall League. Very bizarre behavior for public servants.
Yeah, I know. This is something that people shouldn't be doing. I mean, this is, people calling good bad and bad good. Everything is inverted these days in our society. I mean, why do organizations want to get a reward or an accolade from Stonewall, which actually is pushing this degeneracy? And, worse than that, what they're doing is they're bringing children into this. So, it's bad enough, but, parading yourselves naked on the street, which would normally be illegal. But then they want to have children watching them, and parents are taking their children to look at grown men, mostly, like swinging their bits about. And I don't know what goes through the minds of parents to do this, but organizations that want to be rewarded for getting involved in this kind of thing are just completely twisted. But they must be full of activists who want to get into these organizations and try to get them to go down this political and social path. I mean, we've spoken about this before. It's the whole cultural Marxism that goes on, that uses every kind of area of society. People infiltrate, and then they try to change the values of organizations which once were good, which once tried to do something like keep our country safe. But now they're going and harassing people if you've got the wrong opinion on transgenderism, or you want to protect your kids from transgender activists, and everything has been turned on its head. And we need to turn it the right way up again. But the good news is there's more of us than the activists that have got into these positions.
I believe so. A lot of the commenters are actually saying that what we're dealing with is almost satanic in the way it's being presented to us. Does it feel like that to you?
It's not something I've mentioned too much, but it's the other side of the coin of cultural Marxism, definitely. And now it's becoming very, very open. You can see some of these people almost dressing up with horns and so on. It's satanic imagery. I mean, I've spoken a lot about, Gramsci and the Frankfurt School, which is the cultural Marxist side of things. But, you can look into the other side, look up people like Alice Bailey, Blavatsky, look up Aleister Crowley and Albert Pike. That's the other side of the coin. They've been working on the satanic agenda since the early 20th century. Very true. And that goes with it. And now that's coming out into the open. So maybe it's time to start talking about this and, combating it as well.
Oh, I love the sound of that. Right. Let us move on. The WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. Oh, at one stage it was like, that's all conspiracy theory, it's all conspiracy theory. I was watching a video last night of Tedros, obviously the head of WHO. He was at a press conference announcing the launch of the global digital vaccination passport system. his entire speech is sort of injected with, we are coming to close down your privacy. We are coming to invade what was the last shred of who you are. And it feels very much, it is Big Brother, isn't it, that we're dealing with here?
Well, it's Big Brother. It's more than that. It's like global government with Big Brother and all this surveillance technology that they've just, created and developed over the last 20 years. They want to implement this, but just because you've got a technology doesn't mean it is good. Right. We need to make sure that it doesn't get implemented. This is almost like what Orwell was warning about. I see sometimes people say, look, 1984, it's meant to be a warning, not a prophecy to make, this stuff is coming. We've got to stop it. But this pandemic preparedness treaty, it looks like the beginnings of a global government because they want to take away sovereignty and override democracy in all of their member states. And, Rishi Sunak is going to sign up to it. Whatever we say, whatever we do, that's obvious. He's not going to take any notice of a petition, even if it has 2 million people. No. So we need to get rid of them at the next election and then get out of this thing. Yes. And we need to leave the World Health Organization. We've got to be as radical as that. These global bodies that have been set up and people thought, oh, well, they're just for our good. They're just benign. They're about peace. No, they're not. It's now becoming very clearly obvious. They're about taking away our freedom and putting in a total control and surveillance system over us. And they could decree that we have to have a lockdown. They could decree that we have to have quarantines and coerced injections. No one should have that power over us. No. Not in our own government, certainly not an international body that is not democratically elected by the people. So it's very clear to me, we need to leave the WHO now and get out of this.
For anybody who's not familiar with this, I have to say that David is literally not over-egging the pudding here. I'm reading directly from the government's own documents, and I will just say that this is what it says. The main goal of this treaty would be to foster an all-of-government and all-of-society approach, a strengthening national, regional, and global capacities and resilience to future pandemics. So literally, the only difference between us conspiracy theories and everybody else is like basically 3 months these days, isn't it? That's what it comes down to.
It's gone down in time.
Has it? Are we talking about weeks now?
Months. I think we're getting better at seeing what's going on, to be honest. And, before there was a little bit of a reticence to actually call things out straight away because you don't want to be called and labeled a conspiracy theorist. This is one of the techniques that the globalist powers use.
Demonization.
But I think we're getting better at recognizing what's going on and just calling things out as they are immediately. And we have to do that. You see something happening, you've got to fight it from the very beginning. Otherwise, they get a 2, 3, 5, 6 month head start on you.
Right. Exactly. At the moment, they're currently negotiating issues such as the definition of it, how the treaty would work, key international principles, setting up a new governing body. Right. Other general legal issues relating to the treaty, such as amendments, withdrawal and dispute settlement. The key dates moving forward, of course, there's a sort of a final date here, which is the 77th World Health Assembly in May 2024. And that's when they intend to have it in place. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's right. They're just going through all of the discussions at the moment and working out the details. And I'm sure there'll be some small objections, but they'll push through the meat of what they want to do, which is the control system. And that will be voted on next May. 2024. Mm-hmm.
It is scary stuff, isn't it? I mean, now we've got a little bit of hindsight and distance between us and C-19. What do you think it was all about?
I don't think that there was actually anything that was COVID-19. Most of it was flu. It was rebranded flu. And we know that from the statistics because just suddenly for 1 year, flu disappeared from an average of 20 to 30,000. It all went down. And so many people were misdiagnosed with these PCR tests where they were, they were told and the test results came back that they had COVID when they didn't have any symptoms. So it was all just mass propaganda, mass psychosis. And it's really hard to believe how everybody fell for it.
Oh,
Propaganda was enormous.
it was enormous.
Overwhelming.
Fear is a huge thing. It was a huge factor in it. And we know that they used a minimum of £130 million to scare the life out of taxpayers with taxpayer money. We know that.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it shows you how they can manipulate people if they want to. And everybody was manipulated and went along with it. Even people who were like, a little bit questioning and weren't too worried, they went along with the lockdowns, and then they got an injection just to go on holiday, just to go to their job, even if they didn't want to. I mean, but there were still many of us, millions of us, who said no, who didn't succumb to the propaganda. And I think there's more people that refused it than they thought would do so.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I lift my hat to everybody who stood with me and didn't go for the lockdowns and didn't get an injection or a test or anything like that, because we in some way we have scuppered their plans. They wanted to bring in a permanent lockdown.
Right.
We knew that at the end of 2022, they were going to go for a fourth lockdown, and then hundreds of thousands of people went out in midwinter in London to have a massive march.
Yes.
And then there was the NHS 100,000 who stood against these coerced injections for doctors and nurses that they wanted to bring in. And we defeated that. Right. People power defeated that.
We did indeed.
But their plans go on, as we just talked about. They want to go on to this new pandemic treaty and digital currency and the vaccine passports. They want to bring that back in again.
Never ending, is it?
Not over.
No, it's not over. And talking about not being over, what are your thoughts about what's currently happening in Russia and Ukraine?
Well, there's supposedly this counteroffensive going on, but it's not going very, very well. As I've said from the beginning, this is something that the West and the wider world should not even be getting involved in. There could have been peace before the war. This could have been stopped. There were 2 or 3 attempts at making peace deals. There was in Turkey in April last year. Zelensky and Putin came to an agreement, and then Johnson went over, had a chat to Zelensky. I don't know what they said, but the next thing we know, he pulled back from it. So our country, sadly, is complicit in making this conflict go on and get reality further than it should have been, and that's a utter shame that this fake conservative government has brought on this country with the complicity of Labour and all the other parties in Parliament as well. We should be trying to stop the war and de-escalate. There's no other, thing that we should be doing. It's clearly obvious because Ukrainians are dying, Russians are dying. We're sending all of these weapons over, escalating, the HIMARS and then the Storm Shadows. What's it going to be next? Is it going to be, fighter jets? The more this goes on and the more this escalates, the closer we get to a nuclear war. And that nobody wins that. I mean, what do they want? Do they want to blow up the world? This is absolutely insane that we continue to escalate it here.
It absolutely is. You've got them going in the comments here, David. Peter says our government is complicit in war crimes, and that is the reality, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And they should be held to account. They need a Nuremberg trial just as much as I say this for the whole COVID situation. But what's going on now in Ukraine? Anybody who's escalating this situation, and, I will say Putin went in there to defend ethnic Russians who were being bombed by the Zelensky regime and before the Poroshenko regime in the eastern Ukraine. They were supposed to have rights as Ukrainian citizens under the Minsk agreements, but they broke that agreement and killed 14,000 plus ethnic Russians under the auspices of the US government with Victoria Nuland and so on. I mean, that's all documented. No one can dispute that. No. And I've said that many times. And if we could just recognize that, then we can de-escalate and we can get back to normality. But the longer this goes on, the harder it is going to be, because I think now, Russia is just digging down, and they, initially they had the special military operation. It was just about the Donbass, but I think now they realize they want to get rid of Zelensky and, perhaps take over the whole country, because it's a threat to them,
Exactly. Absolutely. David, I appreciate you joining us so much this morning and just being so forthright and honest. I've said this before, but I cannot say it enough. Just because we live in a world where we are surrounded by absolute cowards, and politicians are the number one cowards, because their job is literally to represent the people. And this is a man who actually is prepared to represent the people. Everybody, it's David Curtin from the Heritage Party. Thank you for joining us on Rise this morning, David. Take good care of yourself. Sonia. Lovely to see you.